The methods of training question revolves around the methods we can use to train to improve all the components of fitness that we may have already tested. So we're looking at mainly 6 methods of training that you need to know around how to describe how to do each method and how it will improve the different components. So the first one is weight. So we can see weight training, and we're looking at the WIMP CC. Okay, so if we can help us remember the 6 methods, we've got WIMP CC. So we've got weight, we've got intermittent, we've got mobility, we've got plyometrics, circuit and continuous. So the first one, weight, obviously improves strength, and we're looking at maximum strength normally through weight training, or it could be muscular endurance, but we would normally be looking at strength. So weight training would proceed after a 1 rep max testing, and we should use the 1 rep maxes for different lifts to work out percentage of maximum. So for example, it might be that we're looking at something like an 80% of your maximum of your 1 rep max that we're lifting with a certain amount of reps and sets. So we're looking at reps and sets. So it could be that in terms of strength that we're looking at something like 5 reps, maybe 3 sets, and as I said, maybe 80% maximum. That can obviously change depending on the program and what we're doing it for, but they will be kind of main guidelines. We can use different machines, so we can actually use free bars, free weights, or resistance machines that you would get in a gym. We should use the principle of overload in order to progress the program. So obviously that 5 reps, 3 sets of 5 reps at 80%, I would look to overload that in different ways by increasing the sets reps, by increasing the weight, or decreasing rest, things like that as well, using your FIT principles. So the second type of training is intermittent training. You just need to know what intermittent work is, and intermittent work involves random work basically. So most game sports are intermittent, i.e. they work at different levels of intensity, and certainly in terms of actual high intensity, in terms of rest, in terms of all of that being random. So we do lots of, so game sports for example, you'll do different activity levels of, full pace, 3/4 pace, half pace, jogging, walking, stopping, changing direction, and all of those things happen in a random order, which is what intermittent work means. So one way of doing intermittent training, to train for that, would be to use interval training. So you can see here that interval training is one way of doing this. So interval training is where we have a period of work followed by a period of rest. So it may be that you're running 20 meters at full pace, then you have 10 seconds rest, then you do another 20 meters at full pace. Now obviously to make it more intermittent, you would add in the levels of activity of different nature as well, of different pace and intensity, etc. So intermittent training would normally improve speed in terms of what we're looking at, in terms of that high intensity periods of activity, or certainly sort of anaerobic activity and power. You can do longer aerobic type work with intermittent training as well, and indeed like with interval training, so long interval training rather than short interval training. So that obviously depends on what activity that we're doing, but in terms of what we're looking at here, we're more looking at speed. Mobility training obviously improves flexibility, and you need to know your different types of stretches, so you can see them here. So we've got static against dynamic. Obviously a static stretch is one that is held, whereas a dynamic stretch is one that moves. Ballistic is slightly different. Ballistic is one where you would bounce into the stretch, so there would be some actual bouncing of the stretch rather than dynamic where it's just moving. Those stretches can also be active or passive. So active, you are doing the stretch yourself by just the muscle groups doing the stretch, whereas passive uses some sort of assistance, and that's normally a partner or, for example, a piece of equipment or wall. The other type of stretch that's quite developmental and that might be worth using is PNF, so proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, and that uses something called the stretch reflex. So we basically we're tricking the muscles into thinking that we are relaxing, and then we are performing. So we're performing an eccentric contraction, and then a concentric contraction. So any stretches that you want to improve flexibility should be held for at least 20 to 30 seconds. Plyometrics improves power, and plyometrics is jumping and bounding type exercises. So you can see the guy at the top there jumping on and off a box, and again this uses this thing called the stretch reflex. So the muscles are loaded. So there's a preloading going on within the muscle, where we get the eccentric contraction followed quite quickly by a concentric contraction. So the muscle is fully loaded, as in it's full of power because it's fully relaxed, before we get a full concentric contraction where it contracts. Circuit training can improve a few different things, and that it could be tailored to improve what you want it to improve, but generally in terms of our exam we would look at it improving muscular endurance. It could be cardiovascular endurance. Indeed it could train lots of other different things if you tailored it that way, but these would be the main ways that we would do it. So we work on stations, and it might be between 8 and 12 exercises, something like that. And obviously you do one exercise, a certain amount of reps or a certain amount of time, and then you move on to the next one. And the order is worth thinking around about which exercises you put after the next one. So you can see on here that we've got some star jumps followed by some squats, followed by press-ups, followed by sit-ups. So they're working different areas of the body, so the order would be quite important there. Exercises can be made specific to the sport that you're doing, so make them sport specific, make those movements and the muscles and the energy systems, things like that, also specific to what you're doing. And it's also important to consider what participants you've got in terms of their level of fitness, in terms of their motivation, what level they're at, how fit they are, etc., as well as the time and equipment that you have available. So all the normal factors that we would take into consideration before designing something. The last method of training is continuous, and this improves cardiovascular endurance. Continuous training is where we have a steady state, low intensity type of activity. So normally running, jogging, cycling, swimming, etc. Here we can use our heart rate training zones, so working out your maximum heart rate, 220 minus your age, and then looking at different training zones, normally up to sort of 80%, between 60 and 80% to work at any sort of given level that's going to have an impact on training. We can also use the Carvone principle, which is a bit more complicated, but uses heart rate range, which looks at the difference between resting heart rate and your working heart rate and works things out in that way. And a different method of continuous training is fartlek. So fartlek means speed play, so we would look at it's a continuous method because we keep going, but we're just using different speeds of training. So if we're running, it could be that it's a run, jog, walk, sprint type of mixture of different speeds, which can be done by either distance or time.